Nintendogs, the DS game that captured the hearts of millions. It opened up the world of gaming to those referred to as non-gamers and gave parents an out on buying the family a real pet. Nintendogs was one of the first games I ever owned, gifted alongside my pink Nintendo DS Lite for Christmas back in 2008. I don't actually remember receiving these gifts, nor do I really remember life without them at all. But I do know that I was obsessed with taking care of my pixelated pups from the second I adopted them. Now, 13 years on, I went back to visit those dogs and see how my experience has changed since then and how nostalgia plays a role in my fondness for the game. For the purpose of this analysis, I wanted to experience the game from a starting point, and the best way to do so in Nintendogs is to adopt a new pet. Upon starting up the game, I discovered I already had 3 dogs at home and each slot in the dog hotel was occupied. This meant it was time to donate a dog, something I do not remember experiencing previously. Now, despite only being a collection of pixels, I felt like the most horrible person erasing a dog from my game. I understand that this feature is included to enable players the freedom to choose different dogs and replace those no longer wanted, but it felt so insincere and isn't a realistic depiction of what it's like to own a real dog. In Chesney and Lawson's article, Learning to Care for a Real Pet Whilst Interacting with a Virtual One, the educational value of games like Nintendogs, they explore how exposure to pet simulation games have the potential to teach children the fundamentals of taking care of a real pet. While I agree that Nintendogs and games alike can play a minor part in preparing individuals for the real responsibility of being a pet owner, Nintendogs lacks consequences for the player. A dog's care status can be viewed in the information tab under their picture, however there are no notifications to alert the player that the dog is in need of something. The only restriction is not being able to walk your dog or enter contests. The dogs will also never pass away, but Nintendogs does state they may run away if neglected. I have never experienced this even after playing the game inconsistently for 13 years, so I do not consider this to hold much significance in this argument. I can understand why the game was designed without the negatives of owning a pet, but the lack of consequence for the player does not support the idea that Nintendogs can assist individuals in becoming better pet owners. The game has an overall wholesome energy with very relaxed gameplay and no clear objective except to simply look after puppies. When playing Nintendogs as a child, my favourite aspect of the game was the agility trial. My main focus was on training my Chihuahua to win the agility championships, although upon revisiting the game, I became aware that I had never actually won the championships. But rather than spending my time trying to achieve my childhood dreams, I started fresh with a new pup, Cleo the Golden Retriever, named fondly after Cleo from H2O Just Add Water. After getting Cleo settled in her home and teaching her her name, I began to teach her to sit. Obedience was not something I paid much attention to previously, but playing the game many years later, for some reason I became really interested in it. Perhaps this was to do with the utilisation of the DS microphone and how the dog actually recognises when you say the correct or incorrect command. As you can see, even after just a few days playing, Cleo learned many tricks, compared to my other dogs Lulu and Jess from my childhood, who each only knew one trick. I found this interesting as it proves how the player has the choice in how they want to play the game. There are still some aspects of Nintendogs that I have never paid attention to previously, including the interior design store where you can redecorate your home or even live by the sea. As Nintendogs is aimed at children aged 3 and older, the content is very appropriate, and unlike most games for this demographic, it can be enjoyed by those of all ages. I found myself eager to pick up my DS and check in on my pups due to the style of the gameplay, which is very relaxed, slow-paced, and allows the player to spend as little or as much time playing. I would compare this type of gameplay to Animal Crossing, as they both share characteristics such as running on real time and allowing the user creative freedom on how they choose to play. Chesney and Lawson also made this connection, as well as referring to The Sims, which is another one of my favourites. Chris Cumberford's article, Coconuts, Custom Play and COVID-19, Social Isolation, Serious Leisure, and Personas in Animal Crossing New Horizons, examines how the success of Animal Crossing New Horizons for the Nintendo Switch can be attributed to the COVID-19 pandemic and subsequent isolation that began in March of 2020, as individuals lived vicariously through the game by performing simple, mundane tasks in order to achieve a sense of normality. I would suggest that I have felt similarly about playing Nintendogs during the current COVID restrictions we are experiencing in New South Wales. Sitting down to play with my puppies, making sure they're all well fed, watered, clean, and take them for walks or to the parks for exercise. All these simple little tasks have been really fulfilling in a time where I'm locked up in my home without the company of a real pet. To conclude, Nintendogs will always be one of my top favourite games, making my nostalgic bias for the game extremely strong. However, focusing on different aspects of the game makes for a new experience not influenced by my previous gameplay. There is still so much for me to achieve in this game and plenty of room for new opinions to form. I think Nintendogs is still a great game despite being 16 years old, and due to the style of gameplay, it is very easy to pick back up at any time, making it a great pastime during lockdown for those of all ages. This game has aged very well and is arguably one of the few games loved by my demographic that isn't overly stereotyped or offensive. It's not surprising Nintendogs was the second most popular DS game worldwide, and I would love to see more games like it in the future.